Earlier this month, the ACLU issued a report with a study that reveals blacks were arrested 3 times more than whites for marijuana charges in Charleston County. The NAACP says that these numbers are an indication of racial profiling and wants changes. Live 5 News reporter Mark Davenport recently spoke with NAACP Group, and here's what they had to say.
We have a war on people, and disproportionately the African American community suffers.
Charleston NAACP President Dot Scott is fired up.
It's a big problem, and it's not just, okay, we found this person smoking more. There are issues bigger than that.
Scott is fuming over the numbers released by the ACLU this month, numbers outlining the racial bias of marijuana arrests across the nation.
We're talking about use, possession, just enough.
The report focuses on data from 2010 and is broken down by state and then again by county. It reveals blacks were arrested 3.2 times more than whites for pot charges in Charleston County. Scott says these findings are the epitome of racial profiling.
The numbers that this study covered, it got worse before it began to get better, so surely I expect those numbers to be higher. You could not be in North Charleston and go 2 blocks and don't have 6 or 7 blue lights going at the same time.
The group mentioned Charleston County Sheriff Al Cannon multiple times, calling his handling of the numbers disturbing.
It's unfortunate that our sheriff would dismiss responsible, scholarly legal research as bias without first providing evidence to the contrary.
Although it may not be to the contrary, in a search for answers, I found evidence that seems to support Scott's claim. Arrest records in Charleston County over the last 5 days shows 13 people were handcuffed for carrying marijuana. 12 of those people were black. Only 1 was white. Of those 13 people, 5 had other charges.
It's a big problem. It's a big problem. It's the problem that's dealing with law enforcement itself.
Even though Pastor Thomas Dixon knows there's a lot of variables that go into an arrest, he says the numbers show profiling is still as strong as it's ever been.
The concentration of law enforcement in the black community far outweighs that in the white community, although the numbers for drug usage are about the same.
Sheriff Al Cannon countered these accusations in a press conference held outside his office on last Tuesday, and here's what he had to say.
We certainly put people in jail charged with simple possession of marijuana, but is not based on the result of targeting any particular race. We universally go to where the problems exist.
Okay, I have here with me Charleston County Sheriff Al Cannon. Welcome to Bounce Around Charleston.
Thank you, Reverend Miller.
And NAACP President Dot Scott.
Thank you
for being here. You all may not know this. We're here discussing this, but these two really do get along. But you have to wonder. And American Civil Liberty Union report. Who wants to address that?
I will certainly take a, since I responded initially to the newspaper's request whether or not I had comments to the release of their summary of the report. Mm-hmm. And there were a number of things that I found disturbing about the report. It maintained that we targeted black with marijuana charges. It talked about how we've spent some $50 million in marijuana enforcement. And I can tell you that law enforcement doesn't target any specific, we don't target any specific drug for that matter. Mm-hmm. But what happens is, now, Ms. Scott took issue with the underlying mechanism that I think the ACLU tried. One of the things I had a big heartburn with is that the ACLU is promoting the idea that South Carolina should abolish its marijuana laws, and they use as a basis for that this report that does not look at the circumstances surrounding how these charges are made, where they're made, and what the circumstances are.
Okay, sure. But how do they get their statistics?
Absolutely. And first I want to be clear. When I responded to
in our press conference what the sheriff had said relative to the legalization. That was never an issue for us per se. For
we don't
many,
disagree on that.
Well, I'm saying for us. I don't know what the ACLU's
well, you and I
underlying.
don't disagree on the legalization issue.
Okay, we don't have well, when I say concern about it, it's not. While it may be germane to that report, it's not where the NAACP came down on the side. When the numbers, like I said, the sheriff and I can have our opinions, but we can't have our own facts. The facts are what they are, and the fact remains that, given the fact that we continued for years, particularly during the 2010-2011 time period, where folks. This is not second-hand information for me, Dr. Scott, as the NAACP president. This is first-hand information where folks are being stopped for literally riding on the wrong side of the street. And when that happens and these folks are arrested because they have what they call, it's illegal, they've got marijuana. But if indeed that street is the one you're profiling because you're looking for other things, because it's a high-crime area, we spend that much money, but yet at your center, your detention center, if we would take a fraction of that money and spend it on those people who are arrested now for the use and the possession, not the trafficking, we wouldn't have that much. I did some extensive study, and it's mind-boggling that we would be at the numbers we are spending for arrest and incarceration when we cannot find spaces for people for drug rehab.
Okay, well, let me ask you this. So these reports that are being put out by the ACLU, are there any truths to these reports?
They're accurate as far as they go. But what it doesn't do is recognize the fact that you could do the same thing with homicides. You can do, the bottom line is we go to where the problems are. We go to where the complaints come from. If we get a complaint, and I use this example with Ms. Scott, if we get a complaint from a community that they have problems with speeding, and we respond to that, then we're going to go into that community with a zero-tolerance approach. We're going to charge anybody we catch with a traffic violation in that to address that particular problem. If you the demographics of the location and the tactics you use are dictated by the nature of that problem. As I pointed out to her, on the barrier islands, Folly Beach, Seabrook, Isle of Palm, Sullivan's Island, the problems that they typically have in the spring and the summer are underage drinking. Right? So they address that problem. And guess what? If you look at the demographics, and that's what I think the ACLU didn't do. They didn't take into consideration that law enforcement goes to where the problem is, and they handle the problems in a similar system.
Okay, would you like to address that?
This is what I want to say. You're right. We go to where the problem is. It's what we deem as the problem. When we find that with drug possession is higher on the crime list than murder and homicide.
It's not higher.
Well, this is what I got it at your law enforcement book, and it says the charges and these things are. And when you rate them, when we spend the amount $413 million for corrections.
Okay.
We're talking corrections here, but yet when we talk about everything else that has to do with law enforcement, like safety and juvenile justice, SLED, we go back to about $14 million when we already spent $413 million. It's where what you'd identify as a problem. Maybe we do not see, maybe the ACLU does not see possession as that kind of problem. Education, that's a problem.
And I don't disagree with that.
You need to let me finish, in all due respect, because it affects our community in more ways than one. When you arrest people and they have to go to court, or somebody have to take them out of court, economically, that's a hardship on that community. And to try to justify, but we go where the problem is. If you deem me a problem, you come and get me.
Okay, let him respond.
Well, it's an economic burden on those people. When we get a complaint about speeding, we go in there, we'll cite people for running a stop sign, for speeding, and whatever else, traffic violations. That's addressing that particular problem. On the beaches, when they respond or they know that there are certain rental places that the kids rent and then it's going to be underage drinking. That's where they concentrate their efforts. And if you look at the demographics of who they are charging, you're going to have, if that's all you look at, and you don't understand the underlying demographics of the nature of the problem, you're going to not have an accurate conclusion.
Let me give you.
Well, I noticed something now, Ms. Scott. Sheriff Al Cannon has been the only person that has addressed your issues.
Well, you know what? And we'll have Mullins there tonight as well. But here's what I'm saying. Aside from the fact that those of us who think the sheriff, they've got our best interests at heart, maybe, as I said to you, maybe you need to rethink and try to talk to some of the people in elected that make the decision about the dollar, that maybe if you can do some more education, or maybe you can do some rehabilitation. Here's what I want to say, Reverend Miller. When folks are stopped for bogus reason, that's profiling, regardless to what else you find after that. When you tell me that the tail light is on my car, maybe it wasn't working, I've had people actually stop in front of my door. We're talking 10 feet from the front of my door, and the person and the officer is saying to me, you know what, we stopped them because, you know, we have a lot of crime in this area, and let these folks go. What we don't have the numbers of how many people really get stopped and no charges are filed, because there should be.
So are you saying that blacks are targeted more than whites?
Well, let me put it this way. If you go in my neighborhood, where I'm in a predominantly black neighborhood, and that's the neighborhood you concentrate on for your war on drugs, naturally those black folks are going to be. I happen to be one of these one that has some rentals, as you talked about. But the first problem I had wasn't a black person that had the problem that was doing the methamphetamine. It was somebody else. What I'm saying is, I have a real heartburn when I know that we don't make all of the stops legitimate. Even if you're over-policing, or what I call bogus policing some areas, make sure that you're not making up reason. I have had a personal experience with my daughter where years ago she got stopped for a rolling stop, and later was told by these officers that's what we tell them to do because she fit the profile. She was a college student. Nobody would know that. The friend with her was a college student, but they were driving an SUV coming out Bayside. So we had to stop you because you're doing a rolling stop. So that's what I'm talking about.
So I must give you the opportunity. Are blacks targeted more than whites?
No. Areas where there are problems. You look at the bar shootings. We've got a county council just passed an ordinance. It's got a 90-day, as I understand it, there may be a couple more readings on it, but to make sure that the bars close at 2 a.m. All right. We don't fabricate shooting incidents. We respond to those areas, and that is then going to be an area that we're going to step up our policing.
We're talking about pot here. This whole thing is about.
When you stop somebody in a high crime area and you find that they are violating the law, there maybe is a warrant outstanding. We don't all live in the bar area. All due respect to you, Sheriff. You know, we always agree to disagree. Okay, in all due respect, if you continue to police my neighborhood more so that a law-abiding citizen like Dot Scott gets stopped 2 or 3 times because we just happen to put a roadblock, then to me that's impeding my liberty, and I don't think it should happen. And there's no way to explain away that this pot situation that you got a 3 to 4 ratio or 3 to 1, there's no reason to explain that other than you're stopping more black folks. And if you got
let's do this. Let's take a break.
Okay.
We're going to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the spending of large amounts of money targeting pot users. Well, that was in the article I read.
Yes.
Okay? We'll be right back after this break.